if your guest answers a question and they say anything that you find interesting, pull on that thread. Even if it takes you way off track and you never come back to your other 9 questions, that's going to be the best episode with that person that you've ever had. Because that question of who are 3 people that I've learned the most, I've answered that question 20 times on different shows, right? I probably answered that like 3 times today on different people's podcasts, right?
All the entrepreneurs, the thought leaders, and great minds that you've sat down with, what are your key 3 takeaways that you can share with our audience?
I want to make it personal to you. In helping you, it helps the audience.
Help me. Yeah, help me.
Yeah.
Help my audience.
So like this is I think a great lesson in vulnerability, but also in making a better show, in that you make it about how can you get better? How can you learn from the people that you're bringing on? And in your learning, your audience learns as well. So is that a question that you personally care about my answer to? And if so, then why? And if not, it just sounds like a good, then dump the question and move on to something else. Like if you said, hey, I'm really struggling with who to model, or I'm struggling with how do I monetize this, or I'm struggling with XYZ, I'm struggling with how to deal with parents who hate me. I don't know, whatever, like whatever that is, and then turn it into a coaching session. So how does that question help you, or does it?
Not necessarily me. No.
Okay, then forget it. Like, okay, forget it. That's a great, yeah.
Oh,
no more questions. Here's what I would do. I would come up. It's good to have a list of questions just so that you're prepared and you have people come on. But I would be willing to, if you have 10 questions on your list, be willing to throw away
half of them.
Yeah, or more. Like, what you should do is if your guest answers a question and they say anything that you find interesting, pull on that thread. Even if it takes you way off track and you never come back to your other 9 questions, that's going to be the best episode with that person that you've ever had. Because that question of who are 3 people that I've learned the most, I've answered that question 20 times on different shows, right? I probably answered that like 3 times today on different people's podcasts, right? So I want you to have something unique, right? And so, but that's great self-awareness. And like, I don't really care about this question. It's more for my audience and it sounds like a good question to ask. So now you're not allowed to ever ask any of those questions that are just for the audience that you don't personally care about.
I love that. Okay,
yeah.
I'm gonna get personal. So what advice can you give me when it comes to just growing? Like you said, I know you talk a lot about putting out content, right? And I love the content that you put out, and it's just, you make it so it's like a very simple concept. So I feel like I'm extremely consistent with putting out content, and I know you say sometimes that even you put it out even when you feel like nobody is watching, right?
You need to be around people who are pushing you into massively uncomfortable zones. So I look at you and I see somebody who is ambitious, who wants to chase down your dreams, who is probably in your family, close friend circle, the most ambitious person that you know. You got bigger dreams than what your parents had.
Oh, for sure.
And that's a great place to be, but it also sucks because you're the one building other people up and pushing them, but who's pushing you? From a place of love, from a like, I love you, you suck, let's go. Like you're barely living your life, right? Not from a jealousy, hate, like perspective, but from deep love for what you're doing. So that's what you need more of. And I would approach it in 2 ways. One, your guests. Kind of like what we just did here, where we started off and I was playing your game and then I flipped it and said, hey, I don't want to answer your questions. I'm going to play a different game because I want you to do more, right? Right? And so bring on more guests like that who you have a personal affinity for, who you think might push you, and then you at least open the door for them to push you, right? By leading with your story and your problems. You may not always get this kind of result, but at least you're creating the environment for it to happen, right? I kind of forced this on you.
I appreciate it. I really do.
And I know, you got some tears, and I know it's out of love and happiness for like what you can make. But that's great. Like, this is the journey. This is what you need more of. You need more of those people around you to push you and say you're capable of so much more than what you're doing, as opposed to just cheering you on and saying, man, look at everything you've done. And then I would do it so that's your guess. Like, use your podcast as your platform to do it. Look for people who are putting out new books. Look at like any books that you love. Go track down the author and say, hey, I love your book. I'm struggling with XYZ. And they're the expert at it, right? Like, you can ask me some things. If you're asking me about a Spartan race, I know zero. Like, I'm not the guy for Spartan races. I've never run one of my. I got nothing for you. But other stuff, speaking, shows, I can help with. And then I would also look at. So I don't know how often you're doing your show, but if you're doing like a once a week kind of thing, then it's tracking down again the experts and guests that you care deeply about, and then 2, surrounding yourself with what I call aspirational mentors. So like Steve Jobs pushes me even though I've never met him, right? This is my office. Again, podcast you can't see, but I got a giant Steve Jobs. I'm looking at him right now. It's like his head is like 8 times the size of mine, and he's looking at me all day long. and I make my videos on my channel for me because I want to be around people who are thinking bigger and pushing me, because I'm the same way. I'm the most ambitious person that I know from my friend circle in my family.
Hi, Jasper Basson here. I just wanted to remind you about the Daily Entrepreneur Tips series. It's a business growth series for entrepreneurs and contains financial information and also information to grow you as a person and your business, because we will never grow our business any higher than we grow ourselves. So click on the link below and I will send you daily information to grow you as a person and your business, and it's for 365 days of the year.
Do not put that fake pressure on yourself that you have one chance to launch this thing. It's the biggest mistake that people make with media properties and businesses. They think there's this, especially if you haven't done it before, or it's natural human nature, right? You want to come out the gate. It's probably no different than starting Daytona off on the right foot, everything. Like when I
you want to win right away. You ain't gonna win right away. You got to build into it.
I really don't want. Here's why I'm most worried about it, my friend. I don't want you to do behaviors that so overvalue the short term in something where you're playing for life. You're trying to build something that you hope pays for your livelihood around a passion you have, I assume, right? The idea is you'd love for this to be, whether it's a podcast or a media property, this is what you do for the rest of your life, making the kind of money that lets you live the lifestyle you want. Is that correct?
It's one of a few components. I am definitely on your, willing to eat shit as long as it takes mode.
Good. So then I would say everything sounds great. Don't over worry about the launch, because it may be episode 96 that really turns the tide. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And
absolutely.
The luxury you have is that you don't work for a television network. Like ESPN didn't buy the rights to you and then the ratings were bad after 3 and they cancel it. You have full control of content and distribution. You don't have to worry about popping because you're not at the mercy of Nielsen ratings and advertisers and all the other dynamics that traditional media had to worry about. If you had a radio show, 20 years ago around this subject matter, if your first 6 weeks didn't go well, you're finished. I mean, here in New York, Mike Francesa was the legendary sports guy. He left, retired. They put in a show. It lasted like 5 weeks, and Francesa was back because the ratings weren't there. You don't have that. So I think before you even ask the question to make the launch pop, make sure that you realize you don't need the launch to pop. It'd be nice for it to be great, but don't over worry about that.
Here's the first one that I launched with the podcast. It's super short. I filmed it in one day with a Sony a7S II and DJI Mavic drone. So I got the music from YouTube's free library. I cut a few clips to that music, added a color grade, and that was it. I really wanted to start quick and dirty, getting started was way more important to me than being perfect. After I've recorded a handful of episodes and I had a little bit more time to think about it, I wanted to give it a professional look, a more polished feel. I still shot this footage in the kitchen, the same exact location, but I used a Red Epic W and an LED light panel, as well as using the super slow motion capabilities of the Red. I think we shot at like 300 frames a second. So I could have taken a similar approach, shot with a more modest camera, and it still would have came out great. I don't want you to get discouraged by the fact that I used a pretty expensive camera kit. Really, I think what would make the biggest difference on this shoot was the additional time and thought that went into it. Shooting really close, tight shots really helped to hide the fact that this was filmed in my kitchen. It might not have looked as crispy, as great as the Red footage, but it definitely would have been a huge step up. This is what the second podcast intro looked like. I was really excited with how this came out, and I used it for about 7 months without changing it much at all. I recently did change it as I started to build up my audience, and I realized new listeners could benefit from an intro that, well, explained who the hell I am to begin with. So I added a voiceover, and I included some behind the scenes footage of me working on various film projects over the years. This is the latest cut. This is the one that I'm currently using. You're listening to The Ground Up Show, a podcast that inspires creatives to make meaningful content and pursue their passions. My name's Matt Diavella, and I'm a filmmaker best known for the Netflix documentary Minimalism. And I'm sitting down with creators to talk about their process, the lessons they've learned, and how to make an impact. So if you're trying to make a dope podcast intro, here are a couple tips to help you clean things up. One, music is the most important, and it will take some taste to really pick the right one for your show. That's something, unfortunately, I can't give you. YouTube's free music library is a great place to start. My most recent track was purchased on Pond5 for less than $30, so there's some great options there. I often spend hours looking for music for every project I work on, so be patient. Don't worry if you can't find, something within an hour. The second one would be, think about the length of your podcast intro. There's no special formula, but if you have a micro podcast and it's 5 to 10 minutes long, you should probably keep your podcast less than a minute. That would be weird if 10% of your podcast was an intro. Of course, if it's over an hour, you can get away with a longer intro. 3, you can cut and splice your music to extend it to really end on the right note. So videos never happen to be the same exact length as the song that you're using. So you're likely gonna have to shorten the music, and you can get creative with it to end on the right note. Here I clip the end of the song with the beginning to make it much shorter, but it also ends on a nice note. When you match up the beat, it's nearly impossible to tell the edit. Number 4, use markers to help you add the appropriate pacing to your videos. I used this extra step when I first started out editing, and it really helped me a lot. The more experienced you get, the more you can pace out the music with your gut. And keep your shots tight, just like I did with my coffee shots. I was shooting in a kitchen. If you don't have a beautiful studio that you can light up, then that's the best way to do it. Keep your footage really tight and macro, and that often helps.